I would read a section from this manual, which is the older Attorney General's Public Records and Meetings Manual. I know many of you have seen me hold this book up before. It's online and publicly available, so it really is an incredibly helpful resource. And I just wanted to read one of the sections that talks about the control of public meetings. As you all know, the COAB is a public body, and you all are subject to the public meetings law. The public meetings law comes from the state of Oregon, and like I said, is in this book and available free to the public online. And so this is what it says about who has the authority to control meetings and what it means to control a meeting. So it says the presiding officer has inherent authority to keep order and to impose any reasonable restrictions necessary for the efficient and orderly conduct of a meeting. If public participation is to be part of the meeting, the presiding officer may regulate the order and length of appearances and limit appearances to presentations of relevant points. Any person who fails to comply with reasonable rules of conduct or who causes a disturbance may be asked or required to leave, and upon failure to do so becomes a trespasser. This authority extends to control over equipment such as cameras, tape recorders, and microphones, but only to the extent of reasonable regulation. So I think the key points here are, one, that the presiding officer by necessity has a great deal of authority and must exercise reasonable judgment in deciding how to control a meeting so that the public business can get on. In addition, the presiding officer has a responsibility to ensure that the participants, those of you who are on the COAB, are able to safely and efficiently conduct your business. And there have certainly been concerns, not just in this meeting, but in other meetings at the city and frankly in the nation, that the tenor of our political discourse has made some members who are parts of public body feel unsafe. And so the presiding officer has a responsibility to ensure that the control of the meetings allows for the kind of public participation that I just described, but also balances that public participation against the need of those who represent the body to feel safe in conducting their business. So the first point is that the presiding officer has authority and has to exercise that authority reasonably. For the purposes of the COAB, your presiding officer is the chair of the COAB. Kathleen Sadat is currently the chair. And in addition, the COAB as a body voted on rules of conduct for its meetings, and those were the ones that Kathleen read at the first of the meeting. So those are the ground rules of the conduct for this meeting, and the failure to abide by those restrictions will result in folks getting a warning that they violated the rules of conduct, and then can result in you being ejected from the meeting if you fail to abide by the rules of conduct. So the other side of this equation, of course, when we're talking about enforcement, is that the law always requires, because the First Amendment is a robust document, it requires that restrictions on a person's ability to speak, which can include the ability to film, that they have to be reasonable. And so the things that are put in place for this meeting are things like keeping some distance between the people who are filming and you all as you go about your work, asking that filmers be in a particular location, and thank you all for being there, so that disruptions in terms of people walking around are minimized. But again, these restrictions have to be reasonable, and I think that's part of what the value of this public body is that you all do need to hear from the public. If you give them an opportunity to speak in a public comment period, that people have a right to say what they want to say, and they can be critical and they can disagree with you, They can do that robustly. They can do that in a way that may offend you even. But the First Amendment allows that kind of speech. What it doesn't allow is for the speech, you can't regulate the content of the speech, but what you certainly can regulate is the disruption that it causes to the meeting. And so the security measures and the arrangement of the meeting has been set up in order to facilitate those kind of reasonable restrictions. So I know we're running late. I'm happy to answer any questions that the COAB may have.
Questions from the COAB?
Yes. The filming restriction has sort of been a lightning rod, and it kind of came out of nowhere.
Right.
And if I understand correctly, the Citizens Review Committee is handling the issue differently. At least at its last meeting. Okay. I don't understand why people in the audience are being restricted here, but apparently they are not in other public meetings.
First of all, it did not come out of nowhere.
Oh.
It came from.
Yeah, let the attorney answer to your answer. Don't interrupt the conversation.
So
you're breaking your own rules.
This sort of talk, I think, qualifies as a disruption. But I want to answer Mr. Stevenson's question.
She was disruptive. The chair was disruptive. Be honest. It was the chair that was disruptive. Be honest.
You're out of order.
It was the chair that was disruptive.
You're out of order.
You were disruptive. It was you that was disruptive.
I would like it if you would just.
I would like it if you apologize for being disruptive.
On your shit, maybe.
For someone who hasn't been to any of these meetings, we don't even know what you're talking about. You're reading from this rules as
I would just appreciate an apology, Madam Chair.
Follow your rules.
I would appreciate an apology, Madam Chair. I'm asking respectfully. You interrupted the conversation.
I think that Mr. Stevenson, I thought Mr. Stevenson, stop. What you need is some background on the source of the change.
Nobody asked for that.
No, apologize like in kindergarten.
There are people who would like the background, and the background is.
No, she can do the background.
She doesn't know the background.
She's very smart. She does. She can answer the question. She knows that. So she does.
Ellen
We
covers
trust
that.
her.
All right, you are out of order, and if you will not comply with the rules, then I will expel you from this meeting.
Yes, Madam Chair.
You're out of order too.
The word reasonableness, let's use that word, reasonableness.
So
I'm not sure what the goal is here.
But I'm going to interrupt because, so I just want to make it clear that as the city attorney, I am here to provide advice to the COAB, and it is appropriate for the presiding officer to, again, control the meetings, and so it is not appropriate for Mr. Steenson having directed a question to me let me finish, for the presiding officer to, if we're being very technical, which I think maybe it's appropriate, is, Madam Chair, would you like for me to answer Mr. Steenson's question? To the best of my ability.
Well, if you know the answer.
Yes, okay. Thank you. So I think, Mr. Steenson, your question was, the filming area has been a flashpoint, and your question was, it seemed to come out of nowhere. Can you explain, A, where it came from, and B, if it is a different restriction than at the CRC meeting?
Yeah, let me just clarify. When I say nowhere, the COAB has had nothing to do. We haven't been able to weigh in or comment or be consulted or have any input on the filming restriction, and certainly the community has not, the public. And so when I say nowhere, it's maybe coming from somewhere, but it's either your office or the COAB. And that feels like nowhere to me, and I think it feels like nowhere to the community.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. So I think part of, I can answer the question two ways. One, in terms of the COAB as a body, or the public weighing in on what reasonable restrictions might be in terms of filming, that's why I started out reading this, because the presiding officer does have the authority, and the chair of the COAB has the authority to create the restrictions around control of the meetings. That doesn't answer your policy question.
The Constitution.
Then it doesn't answer the
have that power.
It doesn't
Mr. Walsh, you're out of order, please.
It doesn't answer your policy question about, nevertheless, whether the COAB or the public should weigh in on those, but just to clarify in terms of who has the authority to make the decision, it is clear that the chair, as the presiding authority, has the ability to create those restrictions. But I think what I'm hearing
Mr. Walsh, you're out of order.
you say is that in terms of determining the reasonableness of those restrictions, it might be beneficial.
You coward!
It might be beneficial to have the input.
Don't go away, Matt. Just go away, Scott.
Hey, man! What are you doing here? You're a disgrace!
Once more, Mr. Walsh, and you will be excluded from the meeting if you continue to yell and to disrupt the meeting.
Get out of here! Do you know what he called the
Where's my security person?
Really?
Really?
He could disrupt the disorder.
Your life is not in danger.
In a
He's
forum.
sitting right
Also
here.
under ADA, keep him in
Your life is
here.
not in danger. Don't get a security.
We're here because of excessive force and custody.
If I
If you
don't
would
get the
like,
public
if you
to
would
quiet down,
like
there's
to
a
be
board
here
member.
and participate in a reasonable Laura, you're out of order. Okay, I'm gonna call a recess right now. Please
Dr.
clear the room.
Rosenbaum and Dr. Watson, you need to take control of this meeting.
Don't go away, Matt. Sadat. Just go away.
Stop the meeting. Watch
Dr. Rosenbaum and
I would
Dr.
like for the board members to leave the room, and I would like.
There is not a threat in the room.
Just go away, Sadat. Just go away.
Don't go away, Sadat. Just go away.
Exclude from this meeting
Exclude you.
Laura Vanderhoel and Joe Walsh.
No. They're gonna kick this old man out that's on oxygen.
What about you called a Jewish guy away from premises? Doesn't that